Professor, how are you? This is Jeffrey Rima, and this is going to be my video presentation for our lesson plan for our multi-engine flight instructor course. We're going to be talking about the factors that affect VMC. First, I'll play a little video about what a VMC roll actually looks like. You'll see here from this aircraft, it's a Beechcraft B-60 Duke taking off from an airport. It loses directional control and then ends up having a catastrophic accident with the ground here. So this is what a VMC roll looks like. Now, as multi-engine pilots, it's our job to maintain directional control to ensure that this doesn't happen. Every multi-engine pilot, it is our primary responsibility to maintain control of the aircraft. That goes with single-engine and multi-engine planes. But multi-engine planes has a little bit of a more complex scenario, and that is when you lose the critical engine. Many light twin engine aircraft have had suffered catastrophic losses, whether it be complete loss of the airplane or death to the pilot, due to its loss of a critical engine. So there's two engines on the plane, one of which is the critical engine. And we're going to look at about how we determine the critical engine here in a second. But just know VMC occurs when the critical engine is lost and directional control is lost as well. So when we talk about VMC and what VMC is, there's really two definitions. They're both under 14 CFR Part 23, but there's two different sections depending on when your aircraft was certified. So the new definition for VMC is as it's the calibrated airspeed at which, following loss of the critical, following a sudden loss of critical thrust, it is possible to maintain control. VMC is typically marked with the red radial line on most of your airspeed indicators. In our airplane, it is in fact marked with the red radial line, so you will see that. It is our job to make sure we are at a faster speed than that red radial line, because anything below that is below VMC, and that's when we're going to experience a kind of rolling tendency or that loss of control. Previously, VMC was defined as the calibrated airspeed at which, when critical engine is suddenly made inoperative, it is possible to maintain control of the airplane with that engine still inoperative. And thereafter maintain straight flight at the same speed with a bank angle of not more than 5 degrees. Now, it's important that we know if your aircraft was certified under this part, then this is what applies to your airplane. Newer airplanes may be certified under the newer definition of VMC. But essentially, they both mean the same thing. You lose thrust at the critical engine, whether it be engine failure or some other kind of failure that caused you to lose thrust, and you're still able to maintain directional control. Now, when we talk about directional control, it's important that we understand that VMC only addresses directional control. In a light twin engine airplane, it does not guarantee that we're going to continue to climb away after that critical engine loss. So we still may have to make some kind of emergency landing in a field or at another airport. So it's important that we plan for that. Now, when we talk about determining which of our engines is a critical engine, we basically use the same concepts as the left turning tendencies, except we're going to use a little bit of a formula to find out when we lose one engine versus the other engine, which one causes a greater influence to the directional control of the airplane. So when we look at P factor, when the left engine fails, we get a left yaw. When the right engine fails, we get a right yaw. And that's due to P factor. Accelerated slipstream, again, left engine fails, we get a left roll. Right engine fails, we get a right roll. The spiraling slipstream effect that causes that left turning tendency, if the left engine fails, we don't really get anything from it. It's kind of a negative point because that slipstream flies or falls away from the airplane. But if we lose the right engine, we get a left yaw. So that actually kind of helps us out. That helps, I guess help us out isn't really the right term, but it doesn't affect us as negatively as if we lose the left engine, because we're going to get a right yaw, a right roll, and a left yaw. Well, okay, so that counterbalances that out. And then torque is going to create left roll on both engines. And that's because both engines, if you're looking from the pilot's view, are turning clockwise to the right. So you're going to get a left roll. So if we look down the list, and on both sides, we see left engine fails, we get a left yaw, a left roll, not a whole lot, and a left roll. If the right engine fails, we get a right yaw, a right roll, a left yaw, and a left roll. So it doesn't affect us directionally as much. And you'll see that when we get into the real airplane, how the failure of each engine is just a little bit differently. So let's continue talking about VMC. Like I mentioned just before, VMC has to do with control. It's important that we remember that VMC is control. Maintaining VMC does not necessarily guarantee a climb. Climb has to do with performance. So we're going to look at the difference between performance and control here in a second, but just beat into your mind, VMC is control. VMC varies under different conditions and aircraft configurations. So the VMC speed is not always that red radial line. That red radial line is where the aircraft was tested by test pilots under a controlled environment at probably sea level to demonstrate the best case scenario for VMC. You may experience VMC before that, depending on your aircraft configuration. We'll look at that in just a second. And then VMC is determined by the airspeed at which the aircraft loses directional control when the critical engine is deemed inoperative. So it loses that critical control. Again, we've already said that, but I just want to make that point again. And like I mentioned before, on twin engine aircraft with clockwise rotating engines, when viewed from inside the cockpit, the critical engine is the left engine. That's what we just talked about before. So it's that left engine that is our critical engine. And that's just because the right engine creates more asymmetrical thrust. So let's look at the factors that affect VMC. This is what we came here for. And this chart kind of labels it out pretty easily. So the factors are on the left. The condition and position is that next block over. And that condition is for the most high and undesirable VMC. So the opposite of that is going to be true for the low desirable VMC. So let's talk about it. So the first thing that needs to happen for a high and undesirable VMC is the critical engine has to be the inoperative engine. That's because, again, that right engine is going to create the most asymmetrical thrust when that left engine stops. The propeller, windmilling on an inoperative engine. So again, you want to have, it's going to be that most amount of drag. That windmilling propeller creates a lot of drag. So you haven't pulled that blue propeller control knob back yet, and now you have a bunch of drag. That's going to create a high and undesirable VMC. The other thing is the operating engine needs to be at maximum power. That's because, again, it's creating the most asymmetrical thrust when it has that max power. And now, at this max power, now you can see the difference between performance and controllability, right? Because obviously pulling back on the power is going to lower the performance, but it's also going to lower your VMC. Maximum favorable or unfavorable center of gravity. So that aft CG is the most high and undesirable position for VMC. And that's just because the arm between the center of gravity and the rudder is less. So you don't have as much rudder authority to maintain direction as you would if you had a forward center of gravity. Also unfavorable is lighter weight. Again, you can see that lighter weight. Obviously, your performance is going to be good. You're going to be able to climb better at a lighter weight, but your VMC is going to be higher and more undesirable at a lighter weight. And that's because there's not enough weight to kind of keep that center of gravity low, especially when you add bank into it and you have a load factor, because weight actually increases the load factor, which increases which decreases that or increases the controllability, right? So the more weight, the more controllable the airplane is. Again, might not be as its performance might be suffering, but it's going to be more controllable. No bank, so you haven't raised that dead engine. That's going to give you that high and undesirable VMC. Also, landing gear retracted. So the landing gear acts as kind of like the fins on the bottom of a surfboard. It helps you maintain that directional control by adding drag and lowering that center of gravity even lower, which again helps prevent that plane from doing that nose over that we saw in the video where it kind of rolls over. Also, flaps retracted. So flaps help create drag and lift, both things that help not only slow down and allow the airplane to fly slower, but also create some lift. And they kind of act like little parachutes on the side of the wings there, preventing that that operating engine from pulling that right side. It kind of blocks that right side from coming around and overtaking the aircraft due to that asymmetrical lift. High temperature, high pressure altitude. These are both high and undesirable, right? High pressure is going to make those engines perform even better, right? And again, create more thrust. Again, high pressure is going to be good for your performance, but it's going to be undesirable for VMC. And then runway elevation. Sea level is the most undesirable. Again, you have the most performance coming from that engine, making the most asymmetrical thrust. Again, that's a great thing for performance, but it's bad for VMC. So these are some of the things that we need to remember when calculating VMC. We're going to talk about the drill, how we fly the airplane, and kind of balance out our VMC speed along with our performance. Because really what we want is the best performance, so we don't have to fly as slow. We don't have to lower VMC. It's also important for us to know that the higher in elevation we go, the more likely we are to stall the airplane before we reach that VMC speed. So the higher you are, the better off you are, and the less likely you are to even, although your VMC may be higher, your stall speed is potentially higher than your VMC. So let's talk about how to avoid VMC, maintain altitude, and possibly climb, right? Because if an engine does fail, we're not just going to give up on it. So we're going to perform the drill. This is the drill we're going to ingrain into your head so much that it's kind of second nature to you. So the first thing is fly the airplane. Maintain VYSE, or single engine climb speed, or greater. Then you're going to mixture, props, throttles, full forward. Then you're going to reduce those drag items. So you're going to get those gear up. You're going to get that flaps up. Again, that decreases your controllability, right? So potentially increasing your VMC. But it's going to give you the best chance that you have of maintaining altitude and climbing. So gear up, flaps up. Then if you have boost pumps, you're going to turn those on. Fuel selector valves, you're going to make sure those are on. If carb heats are on your airplane, you're going to make sure those are on. Make sure you don't have some kind of ice. You're trying to get those engines going again. Then you're going to make sure the magneto switches are on. Now that we've done everything we could and we've come to terms with the fact that that engine's actually dead, we're going to identify by dead foot, dead engine. So whichever one you're pushing on that rudder, and you're going to know because you're going to be pushing that rudder pedal. The other leg, the dead one, the one that's not pushing, that's going to be your dead engine. So that's how you identify. Then you're going to verify. You're going to pull back on that throttle lever for that dead engine. You're going to specify left engine, dead foot, left throttle, coming back, right? Left throttle. You don't want to pull back the good throttle unless you find yourself in that VMC roll to recover, but you want to pull back that left throttle. And then you're gonna say no change in pitch or airspeed, right? That engine's dead. It's not providing any thrust. So when you pull it back, nothing should change. And then so once you verify, then you're gonna feather. So feathering is pulling that blue control knob, that propeller control knob, back to the feathered position so those blades are streamlined so you're not creating that drag on the left side. Because remember, that windmilling propeller is a big component of that high VMC speed. And then you're going to trim. Get the trim in, get the rudder trim, and you're going to hold VYSE, and that's either going to allow you to climb, or you're going to, or if performance is good enough, you can start pulling back and relaxing that live engine while you do the shutdown and secure checklist. Well, that's my presentation on factors that affect VMC, how we identify a critical engine, and yeah, and that's about it. And the different factors, how we identify the critical engine, and what we're going to do if we actually do experience that. So here are my references. Got the video in there if you want to check out the full video. There's also some detailed breakdowns about that crash and how it happened. We used some references, the FAR AIM, the PHAC, and the Airplane Flying Handbook. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Any questions or comments? I'd look forward to hearing from you.